right, hey everybody, welcome back to, I'm not even sure which episode this is going to be, of the Shooting Time podcast. Sitting here at home, just got done hunting a while ago today, kind of a gloomy day here in South Dakota. And I've got a gentleman from Banded on the line, on the other end of the line with Mr. Josh Dokken. He's a guy that I've known of him for probably longer than I knew him, because we're actually both from the same hometown. And oddly enough, it's probably been about 20 years, maybe, that we kind of were hunting in the same time period, maybe not quite that long, hunting in the same locales and the same, a lot of the same places. And we never really met each other or knew each other other than as, competing groups of hunters due to what probably, you must be like 6-year age difference, probably. Something like that.
Yeah, probably something like that. You were always getting my fields.
Yeah, I know. We had one that was like, you guys were the main competition, I think, for our fields. So I think there was always a little bit of, not disdain, but, just, kind of, that angst against the other hunting group in town, or one of the other hunting groups in town. But you guys were, I think, like us, you were very, aggressive in terms of trying to secure fields for hunting. So I know, one of the spots that we always hunted, I think we hunted at the same time, actually, even one day. I don't know if either one of us did very well that day or not, but anyways, Josh is, he's the director of marketing for Banded. Is that correct?
Yep.
Cool.
Director of marketing for Banded, Banded brands. So Banded, Avery, and GHG. Okay,
cool. Yeah, it's kind of the catch-all for a huge amount of waterfowl product out on the market. And he's just another guy that is from kind of my hometown that is either involved, well, obviously he's involved, but there's a lot of other folks that are either involved directly or indirectly in the waterfowl hunting world, whether they're guides, photographers like myself, other folks that are involved, call makers, other people that are involved in the industry. So I just want to get him on and talk to him about a bunch of things, but I was just going to tell him that I was back in Waseca a little over a week ago and did some goose hunting, and it was not a terrible hunt. We had 2 really good days we actually decided to goose hunt during the Minnesota duck opener, which is something you would never typically see me do, but we had kind of some cool opportunities to goose hunt. So we hunted on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday of that opening week of the regular season. And we had 2 good hunts on some molt migrators that we always talk about. And I did that podcast, obviously, last week. Saturday was a really good day. We shot our 4 of us, and we shot our 12, pretty quick, actually, quicker than probably really we planned on doing. Half of those were migrators. And Josh, was that something that, like, I don't think you guys didn't really take advantage of that. And I know for quite a few years, we didn't do anything with that molt migration at all back home.
Now it seemed like, of course, everyone knows that the early goose season is a surefire way to get some action. But as you were talking, I naturally wandered. I haven't hunted that area for probably 20 years. Well, less than 20 years, probably about 12 years.
Yeah.
But I was naturally wondering, where the birds were roosting or, hanging out at, and if you were hunting off a loon or silver or another lake in the area. I was curious to where which birds you were hunting, as we used to call it. But no, I never really did. I saw it at times. But I never really did take advantage of that.
It was one of the
molt migration.
It was one of those things that was hard. Like, it was hard to get people to do it because it wasn't a for sure thing, because you weren't going to a field that had geese in it. And so you were just relying on, and you are relying totally on birds happening to fly over you, even though it's probably going to happen, but it's just not that guaranteed, shoot 'em up type deal like you're going to if you have a feed field. So it was hard. but yeah, when, you're talking about the fields, and it's one of the things that everyone who hunts their local areas has is, everybody knows where the birds are. And, we weren't hunting any of the town birds. It's like a typical Minnesota town. All the geese get pushed off of all the water in the area, and they end up on the lake that's in the local town. And we had 2 lakes in town, and Loon Lake in particular, I don't know, it'd hold anywhere from 500 to 1,000 probably in the September season, I would say. And we would line up around town, basically on the edges of the city limits, essentially, and hunt those birds as they came off and catch them either before they got to a refuge or a feed field that no one could hunt or whatever. But yeah, we were hunting, we're kind of hunting off of Moon and Marsh. I guess you could say that a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's where the birds, half the birds came from that vicinity and half came from somewhere miles up north that were definitely on the move. But I did go down, you mentioned Silver Lake. I was actually down in that area too. So if anyone's in that vicinity, I could give you a pin to a field that had a bunch of mallards and a flooded corn spot. So hit me up if you want.
Or a fee.
Huh?
Or a fee.
Yeah, for a small fee, finder's fee. But, although maybe you had better luck of getting permission on it because I got shut down. So that would definitely, mallards and flooded corn would definitely have superseded a goose hunt in my book. So, but the guy said this is the typical type of response I get when I ask for permission is his cousin's hunt. So I couldn't hunt it. But he was going to pick the field the next day, which would have, of course, kicked the birds out. And so I said, oh, well, they'll be gone, so maybe I could go in. Oh, no, my cousin will hunt it this weekend. Like, oh, okay. So, of course, he didn't understand how the duck thing would work. If you drove a combine through the field, they probably wouldn't be there much after that. But yeah, anyway, so that was watching a few hundred ducks plop into that flooded field got my heart racing a little bit, which actually now that I've gotten back home here in South Dakota, we've gotten a ton of rain lately, and I've seen that a lot here in the last, I've been scouting my butt off the last 5 or 6 days since right before season. And man, we've got ducks just swimming around in corn, flooded parts of cornfields and marshes that are like all of our sloughs and our marshes are way over full. So they're out of the banks and they're up in the bean fields, and we have a lot of ducks around for, I guess, October 2nd right now. So
yeah, you're getting me excited.
Yeah, you've only got a month and a half to go till season starts.
Let's see, October, yeah, month and a half. I'm actually going to be doing quite a bit of duck hunting in Missouri in the early part of November, so not quite that long, but still got a little bit, and it certainly doesn't feel like duck hunting weather quite yet. So I'm not internally, I'm just not in that mindset. But yeah, just knowing that there's ducks up there is good. Oh yeah. It's one of those things. I would have a hard time living much further south than I do because we're lucky that our season starts early and we probably run later than a lot of states to the south of us. We run till mid-January, just within an hour of me. So I can hunt kind of all over the dang place. And for a long, long time, if I had to sit and watch people, shooting ducks on Instagram and Facebook and all that, it'd drive me insane. I don't think I'd be able to take it. So it's tough. Yeah. And I was actually talking with a guy from Kentucky yesterday, and he was saying the same thing about you're like, it's hammered into you. You see all these dudes especially in Canada, they're starting on the 1st of September and they're shooting everything. And even, at that point, I still have 3 weeks to go myself, and we're near the top of the migration or top of the season starting rotation. And, it's still a long 3 weeks for me to wait from that point on. So yeah, if I was down there, I would not dig it. One thing I was going to mention to you, Josh, is, might be a somewhat interesting story, and I'd be curious to see if you guys have anything similar from when you hunted this. But so this town we both lived in was Wauseka, Minnesota, and if you ever Google it, there's this Loon Lake kind of on the western part of town, middle part of town, whatever. And these geese would come off, and it seemed like they typically went to go feed in the mornings to the north. So
there was a lot of the fields around there were, it wasn't super easy to get permission because there's enough guys that hunted that things were usually spoke for. So there was one landowner in particular, guy was about 5'4" and about 350. Tim Fisher was his name. He was as round as he was tall. He was I think he's a pig farmer and a crop farmer. He's an awesome guy. And he let pretty much anyone have permission on anything that he wanted. And he had this right straight north of the lake, just past the city limits, maybe half a mile, maybe not even that far. This kind of little half dome type of a hill that rose up, and it was terraced a little bit, or almost terraced. It was terraced with crops, where the crops were rotated, so there'd always be corn, alfalfa, and beans around this hill. And these geese would come to feed up straight north off the lake, and this hill happened to be right there. And what we would do is, we'd always carry in like 100 Bigfoots because we couldn't drive on it because alfalfa. We'd carry in like 100 Bigfoots, and we'd stand in the corn, and there'd be 4 or 5 of us, and we would just raise an absolute ruckus with calls and with like big triple flags and double flags, and basically make as much noise and commotion as we could. We call these geese off of like, probably within a half mile to a mile either way of us. And the cool thing about it was that you never ever saw a goose landed in that field. Like, I don't think over all the years I ever lived there, I never saw a goose sitting in those fields. But in the September seasons, we'd kill 100, if not more, out of that field. Just our group, me and my friends, and other people hunted it other days too. So there's probably 150 geese killed out of there every year. Maybe not every year, but most years. And so it was just like, it was one of those places that you hunt that's super rewarding to hunt because you were bringing them there. There was, they weren't coming there. It wasn't a give me hunt. It was all based on your calling and your big decoy spreads and all that kind of stuff. So it was. Yeah.
And if you, to add to that too, if you could draw up, an ideal trafficking situation where you've got visibility, hide, and really,
and traffic.
And traffic too. And even like the elevation coming into play where they would land pretty much downhill of you.
Yeah.
Not a super steep slope, but definitely downhill view, which makes shooting very easy.
Oh yeah.
So, you can't, I don't know if I could draw up a better trafficking scenario than that. And like you said, they come up off the lake. They could see you immediately. And you could even pull some that maybe we're thinking of going west or east.
Yep. Oh yeah. We several times pulled them off of, like, people listening won't know, but like where Manthi's house was over there west a ways and east over the highway, we pulled them off of there quite a bit. So it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. And like you said, there was absolutely zero reason for them to land there. And they never did unless you were there, hunting. But it was rewarding. Like you said, you got to see calls work and flags work. And it was super cool. The cool thing about it too is that, especially like in the early season, I don't know if you ever had any of these hunts, Phil, but you could get, in a situation where you get a flock and, 7 and 9 of them are banded.
No, let's not even talk about that. Cause I always heard about you guys getting those like the day after we would hunt and we'd go and kill 100 geese, like 18 geese on a day and no bands because they banded in Waseca on that lake. And we never got bands. And then, of course, we hear through the grapevine that you guys would go and have that 7 or 8 bird. You'd shoot 7 or 8 or 10 or whatever, and they're almost all banded. We're like, and just drove you crazy.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened too. You would hunt and harvest flock after flock after flock and no bands, and then you just get that one flock that, all was banded together, and you. Like I said, you were shooting down at them and because of the corn was generally still standing for most of the year.
Yep, it was.
The hide was, you were
perfect.
You couldn't get a better hide. So you could hide a lot of guys too.
And you're standing when you were shooting.
Yeah. You just, nothing that came in there got away.
No, it was a pretty brutal spot for them to get out of. I went by it the other day though, and it's not even huntable anymore. There's now a bank down at I think it's a bank down at the bottom of the hill. So it'd be pretty much impossible to hunt if it's not even in the city limits now. It might be. One interesting thing about that was, and this might be something you guys had too. So our town high school was, what was it? A quarter of a mile from the bottom of that field, maybe half mile, third of a mile. It wasn't far.
Yeah,
it was close.
The baseball fields were, yeah.
Yeah. The baseball field and the practice football fields are right there, to the point where we had to call them from landing off of that green grass. Sometimes you drag them up the hill off of that. Well, one morning we were out there. There was like 3 or 4 of us, and it got to be, I don't know, 8 o'clock, probably 8:15, something like that. And in Waseca, the marching band was this gigantic thing. It was, they'd go travel over, and they were played in Super Bowls and Rose Bowls and all that kind of stuff. And it was this huge thing. And so they were out practicing one morning, in the football.
They're legit.
What's that?
I tell people about them all the time. That it's not something that people think about, but we had like literally an elite marching band.
Oh,
and to your point, they got to somehow, they got to practice like all the time beyond, school.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Designated hour. I mean, they were out there at 6:15 with that little,
clicker, the clicker thing, the metronome.
Metronome, that's the word.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, they used to march by my house. I lived down the road of the schools on, and they would march past my house every morning in the summer at like 7, back when I wanted to sleep until 10. So yeah, I didn't appreciate that. But so this morning, say mid-September, school had just started. We were all out of school at this point in time, and we're hunting the spot, and all of a sudden here comes the band, and they're playing, there's music going. A flock of like, I don't know, 6 or 8 geese come up off the lake, and we see them, and we start calling at them, and the band's playing in the background, and these geese come in, and we cut into this flock, and boom, 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 and the whole band scattered. They took off running because they thought someone was shooting at them. So that's how close we were to town on that field. So I don't know if you ever had any of those. Maybe they learned what was going on after that first time, but we kind of sat there. We felt bad, but at the same time, it was hilarious. So,
yeah, I did have some of those. I think I was relying on the football squad a little bit, but the marching band too. Yeah, it definitely helped if there was activity on those fields because they wanted to get there.
Oh yeah, I kept them off there. I think we had a kid. I think it was one of the guys I was hunting with. His brother actually went out and scared some off there for us one time off of the practice field. So I don't remember if we got those ones or not, but at least it kept them from decoying more birds in there. Because we all know that having a live bird at a few hundred yards away from me is about the worst thing you could possibly have. So, yeah, it was cool. That deal really kind of introduced me to the power of not maybe good goose calling, but we were all pretty good goose callers at the time, but it really showed me like what the power of multiple good goose callers could do. I mean, if you put 3, because you could watch, like, say you saw a flock off in the distance and one guy started calling and no response, then 2 seconds later, the second guy got his calls out and got hid, and he starts calling, and you'd have a little bit of a response. Then all of a sudden that third and fourth guy would kick in, and just like that, those geese would spin on a dime or bank over to you or whatever it was. And as soon as you hit that third and fourth guy, it was unreal what the difference was between even 1 and 2 good callers. So
yeah,
I don't hunt.
It was crazy.
Go ahead.
And this was all just for a little context for the listeners. This was all kind of going down in the early 2000s when the short reed goose call was really kind of
for sure
getting popular and rolling. And so because there was limited areas and different groups, and this is just our area, and I'm sure it happened everywhere else too, but it kind of was like the iron sharpens iron thing where to be successful, you had to be able to traffic birds and call, because you couldn't always get on the X, so to speak. So
rarely.
You had to call them, you had to flag them, you had to learn how to hide and set up decoys and all the things that are important for successful hunting. And so what's crazy about that is that the amount, and I tell people this all the time, the amount of like good, and not really good, like elite caliber callers that have come out of that little town and that little area, even from, if you go from Waseca to Rochester to St. Cloud, that little triangle there, that area. I mean, there's no, I mean, per capita, there's gotta be
Southern Illinois would probably be the one. That'd be the one place I could think of where there's a very high density of people that called like that.
Yeah,
because you were forced to.
Yeah, and it reminds me a lot of a mini version of a Stuttgart, where the same thing happened there with duck calling. Before the mojo and all that stuff, the calling was
the deciding factor.
The deciding factor. So you just sort of breed this population of really good callers. It's super unique. It's something that it's fun to look back on and just kind of think about some of the names of people that have come out of that area and went on to, have outfitting services or work in the outdoor industry, or even, there's some champion callers competitively that have come out of there too. So
for sure.
I think that's, to me, that's really kind of a cool thing about that area that, I always have appreciated.
Well, it's one of the things that like kept me in it too, because as you're younger and you're growing up, I probably would have stayed in duck hunting regardless. I mean, it's just how I was, but it's one of those things that when you have those friends that are like that and they're that into it, you almost put it even as a competition amongst your friends, who can be better, who can be the better goose caller, and it was like not you against other groups, but it was like you kind of like internal competition, like it was never mean or anything, but we always wanted to be who could be the better goose caller amongst us and who could do this note and who could do that. And it benefited us all mutually. And probably as people, hunters in the town, it benefited all, because now all of a sudden you go and you hunt somewhere else and you don't have to always hunt that same way. That it seems like when you're hunting the X field. So it's like, it's a breeze compared to the other stuff. So it's a very unique situation, and it'd be kind of neat to actually do a little in-depth,
document that,
in-depth history on that. Like the guy yesterday, I talked to Ryan Graves, and he'll be the podcast that comes out before this, hopefully tonight. And he's talking about some of these big historic names. He's a huge guy in terms of like waterfowl nostalgia and history and collecting. And some of the books he talked about of places, and some of the hunting books about just Minnesota in general, like duck calls of Minnesota, duck decoys of Minnesota. There's probably duck boats of Minnesota. It'd be cool to do something like that, like duck and goose call hunters of Minnesota, and just to
very cool,
and to have it. If a guy could put that together, that would be a fun thing. I think just our little town would have to be pretty heavily involved in that, along with probably another half dozen to 10 towns that are very into it too. But it'd be kind of neat.
Definitely in the discussion. Now, another thing completely unrelated, unique about Waseca as well, and this had sizzled out many years before Phil and I even existed, probably. But the original herders, the absolute, the I don't remember their names, but the brothers who started herders,
the original Cabela's.
Yeah, the original Cabela's, really. That started in little old Waseca too. That's crazy too.
Yeah, there was so anybody who pays attention to any waterfowl history, or even maybe a little bit of older decoys, will know about herders decoys. But I mean, they made everything from old duck boats, like 2-point duck boats, like something like a Karstens,
calls.
Yeah, calls. They made clothes. They had this all in their showroom here in Waseca there. And my grandpa actually worked at that store for, it was like his career for the last part of his life, I guess. So, and it closed. Yeah. It actually was there. I remember walking in to the store one time, and there was a polar bear, a mounted stuffed polar bear, right when you walk in the door, standing on its hind legs. And that was what greeted you when you walked in. Because I mean, the herders they hunted everything, and they were very wealthy, of course, with that business. And They hunted all over the place, but duck hunting, like, and they were kind of they were the original waterfowl brand, I guess I would say. I mean, I don't, maybe I'm speaking out of my knowledge base there, but as far as I know, they kind of were that first company that spread out and did more than just one thing. But they would be like the predecessor to well, they were both, because they would be like the predecessor to Avery, who Avery has made everything under the sun forever. But they're probably closer to Cabela's, because Cabela's does make their own and retails it in a store. But either way, they did that, the whole gamut of waterfowl stuff. So it's kind of cool to have that little bit of history. And whenever I tell, especially an older duck hunter, that I'm from Waseca, that's the first thing they'll ask, is if I knew of the herders at all. Like, yeah,
it's cool. I've got some friends whose dads and stuff worked there as young kids or whatever, and they've got some old memorabilia, boxes of old stuff, and it's really, really cool to go see some of that stuff. Matter of fact, I need to get some photos of that and share it anyway. But that just so cool. And I think, I don't know for sure, but I think that they may have paved the way for how the Cabela's brothers started with the mail order catalog. I think the herders had a form of that.
They did, actually, yes. They had, I believe they had a catalog. I think it was more of like almost like a newspaper version rather than like, the nice glossy type deal. But yeah, they did have that. I think the Waseca County Historical Society has a big display of herder stuff, or maybe it was a temporary deal. But a guy that we both know, that Terry Middlestead, he has a pretty significant collection of herder stuff, I believe. So I've seen parts of it come and go on Facebook. I don't know what he has anymore, but I know at one point in time he had all old pamphlets and kind of like books that they would put out about with advice, and tons of old decoys and the weights. And I think he might even have a boat. I'm not sure on that, but like an old herder's like duck boat. A lot of that stuff, especially in that local area, has a lot of collectible value. So it's kind of a neat little side note to our hometown and our connection to each other, I guess. So, but anyways, so you're as the director of marketing. I've seen a little bit of what you do, and obviously talking over different times, I know a little bit about what you do. And what I've kind of gathered is that, as a marketing guy, your job is similar to what one of my first jobs out of college was as a marketing coordinator. And I realized that if you have the word marketing in your title, that you essentially have, you take on any role or project or job that isn't specifically designed or designated to someone else.
Exactly.
Because we had, if someone doesn't know how to do it, give that to marketing, is basically how it ended up being.
And I joke about this all the time, but how it kind of, to your point, works with us, it seems like, is like, if it involves a computer, for some reason, it's marketing's job. I think, like an example of one I had recently is imagine like a Word document, that has, text not related to, just a company, sort of memorandum type thing. Yeah. But there was logos needing to be placed on it, right? So, let's give that to marketing and let them, put logos on since you just know how to do everything, evidently. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be very comparable to what I ended up. This was for a cable company that I worked for. And I was calling technicians and telling them how to like set up their machines and all this and that. And just because I was in marketing, I was the guy who had to do it rather than their actual boss, who should have been the guy doing it. And, but anyway, so so you've been with Banded for quite a while. How did you roll into that? How did you get into the waterfowl industry as a job? Because that's something that I know that there's a ton of people who want to have a job in the waterfowl realm. But like me, when I got out of college, I thought, honestly, when I left college, I thought my job, I wanted to work for Avery. That was what I wanted.
I interviewed at Drake because they had an opening, didn't get it, and then went to work for Cabela's. And so that was kind of my gig in the waterfowl world, I guess, in the hunting world. But like no one really knows exactly what they want to do or what jobs are out there. And so how did you kind of roll into that?
Yeah. So, and I have some thoughts too on getting into the industry as a whole, but, I'll start with me personally, how I got into it. Cause I get asked that question all the time too, is, you know, how do you get into the waterfowl industry? And for me, back to when I was a teenager in Waseca, hunting geese and falling in love with it and, you know, literally eating, sleeping and breathing it, I got into the goose calling stuff, to the short reed goose call revolution. And I just kept practicing and wanting to get, you know, I wanted to be the best guy in the group. And then I wanted to be the best guy in the town. And then I wanted to be the best guy in Minnesota and so on. You know how that kind of spirals.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And not that I was, but that was my mindset, is I was all in on it. I wanted to be, you know, the best. And I really kind of fell in love with it as an instrument. And so I got into the competition calling is sort of my first, entry into it. And, you know, at first it's just going to local contests, competing and all that stuff. And then pretty soon, you know, a call maker, you know, wants some affiliation so you represent their calls. And so that's kind of how I progressed into it. First insertion point was competitive calling. Went on, years later to, of course, getting into guiding, and outfitting of just a way to extend my season and do it more and not have to get a big boy job, I guess.
Who'd you guide with?
So a couple places, and this is actually how, I got involved with Banded too. So, I guided, so I started doing, goose hunts and stuff, up north with various just small, companies, and some even a little bit on my own, just, overflow. Guys would say, hey, I'm booked up, but, here's a guy over here. And so kind of got involved that way. And then I wanted to extend my guiding season. So I started to look for places in the South, living in Minnesota at the time, that I could, you know, go down and continue my season, you know, down there.
Yep.
So I started guiding, in Missouri at a little guide service, for 2 or 3 years. And then I got connected not far from there. One of my good buddies was guiding at the same time, at a place called Waterfowl Adventures. Okay. Waterfowl Adventures was owned and operated by Keith Allen and Christian Curtis.
Oh, yep. Who
at the time were running, I think they were both sales reps at Avery, pre-Banded. Banded didn't exist right at this time. So long story short, I make that connection with them. And we hit it off. They just become friends and all that stuff. And through my experience with guiding and calling and stuff, you sort of educate yourself and kind of understand the nuances of the industry, at least from a consumer perspective. You know, when you're touching clients every day, you're seeing how they react to products and all those kind of things. And you can offer advice just based on, you know, the fact that you're sitting there every day doing it. And so that was, that's how I got started. And then that relationship, you know, years later, when Christian Curtis, Eric Larsgaard and Rick Frisch all worked for Avery, at the time for a long time. And they decided that they wanted to, go a different direction and develop products. They felt like they could do something that wasn't being done. So they left and started Banded. And so basically what happened was Christian called me up and said, hey, we got this thing going. And they had already developed it pretty far, but there was no product at market yet. It was still just a name with some product ideas. And he basically said, hey, we need some help. And the other thing I had going on at the same time too was when I was working for, when I was doing the guiding stuff, I was also kind of helping some local, call makers kind of start up and develop their programs. And one of the things when you're a small business, and this is in any area, any realm of industry, you have to be a wear all hat kind of guy. You don't have the resources in the funding to hire everything out. So you got to learn a lot and do a lot of things yourself.
You're the IT, you're the marketing, you're the operations, you're the warehouse, you're order taking, all of it.
Yes. And so at this time timing wise, it's weird how so much of this is just timing, but timing wise, what was also going on, is the digital world was starting to pick up. Internet, e-commerce was becoming a thing. Social media was around. And it was a place where marketers were starting to look to reach customers. And so obviously with limited resources and funding with the small, businesses and the call makers, that was a great avenue for reaching customers. One, because it was basically just effort. There was no dollar figure associated with it. So I learned social media. I bought all kinds of books and kind of tried to learn everything I could about it, and how marketers could approach it and all that. So I trained myself on social media. At the same time, I also kind of trained myself in graphic design a little bit, which is weird because I still to this day, will do some graphic design. I don't do near as much anymore, but I never have ever considered myself like an artist or a designer of any sort. It was just one of those things where it had to be done
out of necessity.
And so I got to learn how to do it, right? I mean, there's no other option. So I developed some skill sets, which is kind of where I'm going to also talk about getting into the industry as a whole, my comments on that too in a little bit. But so I developed some skill sets, some things that I could use to provide value to a business. So, and Christian was aware of that. I had started a apparel company with another guy, and we were kind of selling like waterfowl related t-shirts and stuff like that with different designs and stuff like that. So I was really kind of, touching a lot of different things in that area, which was a need, when they started Bandit, is you really needed a guy to do that kind of stuff, logo gear. And we had calls early on too with Bandit. So I was able to help, and Keith Allen ran that. I was able to help, I tuned a lot of duck and goose calls right off the bat too. All that kind. I mean, it was crazy, the landscape early on, with Bandit and what the needs were then compared to what they are now. But, just to reiterate, it was really the relationships with Christian, and he started, and the timing and the skills that I could provide, is how I kind of got started with Bandit in 2012. And I've been working there ever since. And so it's been very interesting to see and watch really a startup, from conception to all the way up, to where we are now as one of the, I guess I would consider us one of the top waterfowl brands in the country.
I mean, one of the biggest for sure, no doubt. It's got to be fairly rewarding to like be a part of that. Like, it's neat when you can step in and when everything is rolling and established, and it's nice because you don't have to do a lot of work, but it's got to be way more rewarding when you're part of the one helping to establish even basic policies on how you do this and how you work with vendors and, how employee policies and all that kind of stuff, that when you're a brand new company, you pretty much kind of have to start from scratch and do all that on your own. So it's got to be more rewarding, I would think, than doing, just jumping into if you were to have just jumped into Avery after they'd been around for 15 years. I mean, I could relate it even to when I was at Cabela's. When I started at Cabela's in 2003, the Owatonna store in Minnesota had been in existence for like 3 years, I think, at that point, or something around that time. And I kind of jumped in, and I was just another guy that worked there. Well, when we opened the store in Rogers, Minnesota, and I was part of that brand new crew, and I took way more pride in how everything went at that store, since I was one of the ones basically molding how it went and the success of it and how employees looked at it and everything that was involved. So I know that little, having that part of it, almost like it was my own. I mean, it wasn't my own, obviously, but almost like it was more my own than the other store was. So
yeah, I can totally relate to that. And that's a lot of the way I felt too early on. And now too, obviously, but, I definitely took it on as my own. It was my baby, and I put a lot, we all did. We all put a lot of effort and time into something that, now it's like, it seems like gravy, but at the time, I mean, there was several times where, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? But
I'm sure where you're kind of in limbo.
I definitely wouldn't trade that. That's my favorite part of the whole thing is that, is building something from scratch and working with your buddies to make something really, really cool. Especially like the guys that are involved that I mentioned that started it. This is not like, some big corporate thing where there's investors from all over the place that don't really have much connection with you. I mean, this is a tight crew of people who are serious duck hunters, have been around for a long time, have really earned their right in the space through being around and not that you have to be a guide or a competitive caller, but those two things are, irreplaceable, really. You just couldn't put, a dollar figure on how much they're worth. The
value of the experience and all that is, like you said, it's something that, and the time spent and the devotion to it it's something that it's going to help in. And it'd be like if a archery guy was going to or if a guy who shot his bow every single day wanted to open an archery shop. It's that value. You can't just have that from someone who doesn't live that. You can't train it, and you can't really instill it in someone who doesn't have that built into them. Same thing with a duck hunter. If you're going to open a duck hunt or a waterfowl company, those types of things, that skill is just that little bit of advanced above what the average duck caller or duck hunter is going to have. So
yeah, absolutely. And that shows too, that translates to the product offering, the products that we put out. We're not going to put products out that don't service the waterfowler, at a high need, and not to, make any product plugs or anything like that. But with the waders, for example, which is one of the things we're known for. I mean, the only person who could know how terrible neoprene waders were was a duck hunter.
Yeah, someone who used them.
And so, and all of it has started that same way of how can we make it more comfortable and more, that experience outdoors with friends and family in the waterfowl blind, how can we enhance that? And that's sort of it's one of the things that I pride ourselves on, and certainly other companies have it as well, but we really are, everyone is a duck hunter and everyone is at a high level, very knowledgeable about the sport and products and all of that stuff. So I think that, that stuff is all definitely important. And it has been one of the main reasons why we've been able to build the brand to where it is, good people, good products.
Yeah, and you can see it in whether it's Bandit or other related companies, even in other industries. The places that have the folks that love what they're doing, because there's a lot of people in a lot of jobs who, from my experience, should not be in them, and especially in small companies like this. I mean, well, that's the one thing. I mean, how many people actually work for, let's say you took Bandit, Avery, Greenhead Gear isn't really its own. Are there people that work just for Greenhead Gear? I assume they're not.
No, we're everybody who's employed by Bandit Holdings is touching and representing all of the brands that fall under, which is Bandit, Avery, GHG decoys, and then the Avery Sporting Dog brand. So we're in. I can talk a little bit about that whole acquisition and transition too. But at this point now, we've kind of each one of those brands sort of fills a category need within their niche. Obviously, Avery Sporting Dog is where the sporting dog products are. GHD is where the decoys are. So it's all kind of holistic now. It wasn't at first, but so yeah, there's nobody. Pete isn't just working for GHG. He represents all the brands.
So I mean, what is there, like 15? I mean, that's one thing I think maybe people don't know. Like, man, when I was in college thinking, God, I want to work for Avery. When I'm done, I was thinking that, Avery was this big company and there was all these people and there was a corporate headquarters. And I mean, back then there was probably like 12 guys, maybe. I mean, maybe more than that with maybe with sales reps, maybe a little more than that. But you guys don't have a lot more than that right now as a whole group. I'm probably pretty close to that.
Yeah, I don't. There's definitely, so we've got kind of two places where stuff happens. In Arkansas, where I'm out of, is really mostly my marketing team, and then our CEO and CFO work out of this office. And then Memphis, where the original Avery was, our COO and a lot of the operations and warehousing is over there. So I'm not exactly sure how many people they have over there, but I would say, 25 people maybe
total.
Yeah, 25, 30 people,
which is not many when you start.
No.
When you start,
not when you
start talking
5,000 SKUs. It's not many.
Yeah. And I mean, millions of dollars in sales and however many vendors you have to deal with and shipping and everything that takes up time, that if someone who's ever worked in whether a retail environment or a warehouse environment or everything takes so much time and effort. And you start thinking that there's only 25 people pulling that off. And then on the other side of that, if you are someone looking to have a job in that side of life, it really limits what's out there for jobs. Because out of those 25 people, I assume you probably don't have a ton of turnover in these jobs. I mean, maybe I'm sure once in a while, but for the most part, it's not like a McDonald's where you're cranking people over every 2 weeks and having to replace them. So there's not a lot of those jobs out there for guys. And that was kind of what I ran into, is I was just like, well, yeah, there's really the only ones that ever come open are sales positions. And, I didn't want to do that myself, especially back then. I was way too shy to ever do that. So
yeah, I'd say, I'd say that's an accurate statement. If there's anywhere where there is turnover, not in our company, our guys have been here for a long time, but it's probably in that sales force. Mm-hmm. There's just, different, they're constantly out on the road making connections and relationships, and they kind of evolve. But no, everything is really 80 for the 20. We don't have the luxury of adding people just to add people. So everyone's job is very specific and specialized. And now I can't even think of anyone, any turnover really in my head. Nothing really even comes to mind. It's kind of the same people have been around forever.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I've noticed. And I would lump, I don't know the details of whether it's tangle free and sick is different, because they're a different thing. But, Rig'em, right? Any of these waterfowl companies that are out here doing this stuff, whether it's decoys or gear or clothing, I assume they're running the similar ship to what you guys do in terms of people and ratio of, price sales dollars to employees. So there's not that many waterfowl companies out there, way more than there was 15 years ago. But even now, with that said, there's still, maybe a dozen that probably have more. There's probably maybe a dozen that have more than 5 employees. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of like the small type guys out there. But the big ones where you actually could go get a job, there's just not that many. So,
no. And I think, like you said, I think people would be very surprised at how many folks are employed at those organizations.
Yeah, how many aren't employed? You mean like the lack of?
Yeah. The number's much lower than I imagine people.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that's what's one thing that's kind of interesting is like when someone calls, a customer service at a place, they're getting real people. They're probably not getting, there's probably very few people dedicated to just customer service answering calls. I mean, they're probably in most places that's also maybe the marketing guy or maybe one of the warehouse guys, or because maybe the one person who kind of is supposed to answer the phones can't take as many calls, and so they're getting the people that are making the product rather than just the people answering the phones, and it's probably taken for granted as to who they're talking to.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I'll tell you, as you said that, it made me realize that's one of the toughest areas, I think, of a waterfowl business, a business operating in the waterfowl industry, to staff and manage is customer service, because during the season you need 100 of them.
It's 100 balls to the wall.
But as soon as February hits, the phone
gets dusty.
And it shuts off almost like a light switch. It's just boom, it's done. And you'll have some trickle in, but and so it's very challenging. And so we have a couple people who specifically handle customer service, and they're definitely overloaded during the season, but they're very skilled at it. They've been doing it a long time. So I see that as one of the most challenging areas of it, especially now, where sometimes people nowadays are reaching out to a business via Instagram before they even send an info to customer service or even pick up the phone, so now you've got to have folks touching all those areas, and we try to have that one-on-one experience as much as possible. So it's definitely
basically what that amounts to is more venues for people to complain.
Exactly.
But I mean, you have Facebook, you've got Instagram, you have the site's webpage. You've probably got do you guys sell through Amazon? I don't know if you do or not.
We don't. We don't.
Like that would be a place where people could leave comments and expect to hear feedback. Probably live chat. I don't know I'm trying to think. Is there a live chat option on your webpage?
No, it's something we thought about, but then again, it's
That's one more thing to watch and monitor.
Yeah, exactly.
Phones, which people hardly ever use anymore, but then emails, and it's daunting. I mean, I was a customer service manager at Cabela's for a long time, and just that whole realm of life is an interesting part to be involved in. So I'm not even going to think about that part of it.
That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, it really is. Not always the most enjoyable one too. So one thing I always fancy myself as someone who, I love products. I was thinking of ways to improve them, or I make my own. I make my own bolt blind. I've done this. I've done that. And so I know how long it takes me to get something like a product or an item that I want to come to fruition, whether it's through the thinking creative process and then the actual production. So I was wondering, what is the process of, let's say you're going to make any item you want to talk about. I mean, how long and what's kind of that process look like of getting something to the market from the time it's, a thought in someone's brain?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And, it definitely varies by product and kind of what, how technical it is and where it's functioning at, something like waders, for example. That takes a lot of testing and time to develop. But I'll use a recent product that we have that I think would be a good example. And that's, with GHG decoys. We, launched a new, series of decoys this year, called the XD series. Right now it's just the mallard decoys. We'll have, goose decoys and other duck species coming as well. But that one, an example of that one. So, how that starts is we obviously decide that we need to fill a need or advance our product line and fill a place in the market with a new product. So we've identified that. We've identified the product that we need. Then, with decoys, there's the developmental stage where you're working with carvers to carve these decoys. And there's tons and tons of iterations that go down, to hone in these, poses and stuff to exactly what you want. So it starts with that, goes a little further. And then once you have kind of your product developed of how you want it, then it's okay. How do we take this to our producers to have them make this, in a way that's cost efficient that our customers can afford and all that. So then that's the next challenge is working with price points and where it will fall, competitively. And also, just in general with, we're a B2B company primarily where we're selling our products to different retail partners. And so you've got to allow for that margin and those kind of things. So kind of it goes over to the factories to kind of make a version of it that's able to be produced. And of course you're still fighting, okay, the quality, we got to make it the best quality possible at, we still got to hit this price too. So those things. And then from there, it's kind of actually, as that's kind of going on, you're getting samples and different things like that. And you're getting those out to different testers and people who are kind of running them through the ringer, really just trying to poke holes in the methodology and find where there's going to be potential issues. So you're working through that kind of stuff. And then you're from there, then there's this is kind of where I come in on the marketing side is everything is basically done a year in advance. So our products that are coming out in 2019, we're actually working right now on that catalog and developing those final, components to bringing that product to market, whether it's naming it or, writing the copy and the bullets and descriptions and getting imagery and content and all of that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff has to happen ahead of time so that when the product is released and launched, you're able to, show it. So, in that process, the testing process is probably what varies the most and what potentially, adds the most time to the process. Sometimes it's not, you find needs in areas where you need improvement, and it's not always quick and easy to make those improvements. You got to wait for the factory to be able to run another rendition of it and all that stuff. So that,
it's probably, it's one thing that people probably take for granted is what testing is. I mean, cause this was Avery. This is before you guys were involved and before it was underbanded. But I mean, anyone who's hunted since the early 2000s knows when, I guess it was Greenhead Gear technically, came out with those first new duck decoys and their goose decoys that the paint was an issue. And it's probably almost been hard to live that down from 15 years ago because there evidently wasn't quite enough testing on that. And that was such a huge thing, even though I think it was probably overblown compared to what it really was. But if you don't put that time in, I mean, it costs you an immense amount of sales, and then you can never get that back, whether it's the goodwill or the perception or whatever it is. It's just, it costs you so much more to try to turn that back around. So the testing is like ungodly or important that people probably don't think maybe it happens as much as it does.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And that's an example of a real life learning that, of course fortunately I didn't have to experience it. Cause that would have been tough from the marketing side. But that type of thing is a learning that our team, because most of them were all around at that time, that they found. And now our testing process is completely different than it was back then. And a lot of times, the other kind of variable in this is that you've got a new product, you're excited about it, you want to get it to market as quick as possible too. One, because you want the opportunity for it to succeed in the marketplace, but then also because you don't know if your competitor's working on it or a similar version or something like that. So there's that piece too. But we found that we're just not going to put out something that hasn't been tested and used enough to where we feel like, okay, this is right. It's just not worth it. Even if you want to, fill a need for a dealer or get to market quick, it's just definitely something that we've taken
almost catastrophic at some point.
Yeah, no, it really is.
In some circumstances, it could be monetarily and just instantaneously monetarily, but also future down the road. I mean, I know there's people who still have ill will towards Greenhead Gear decoys over something that happened in 2003. So I mean, that's just one of those things, like, you just can never get that back, whatever it is. And so one thing about, and I guess being on the marketing side is, I mean, you're directly working to combat this, working for the cable company. I definitely saw a ton of it, but trying to get to change perceptions, like once you've lost a customer, I can't remember what our industry, in the cable industry was, but to get that customer back, I mean, the cost was like 4 to 5 times more on the marketing side to get that customer back than it was to just retain them in the first place, or to get just a completely brand new customer, because you lost them for a reason. And to get them to change that perception in their mind, it was, I mean, almost impossible. And it just wasn't feasible, on the economic side, on the business side, to do it really for most places. And they probably weren't going to be your loyal, promoting customers at that point in time either. So and that's a good point. And it's, in back to kind of us taking a very, small but personal approach to customer service and stuff like that. We recognize that look, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We don't want to lose any customers, and we absolutely will stand, behind the product and make it right in some way or some form. And I think that's how you have to handle that. Cause like you said, it is, losing customers is the worst thing that could happen. And a lot of times what I've found is that, if you admit that a mistake was made and show the customer that you care about them and that you want to make it right, that's sometimes all the team. And there's definitely people who are, never going to come back, but they probably weren't all that vested in it in the first place. And they just there's a lot of people that complain for the sake of complaining as well. So. And they were buying something because it was the cheapest at the time, or they got it at a sale, or we had the same at Cabela's, and we had people that you never saw in the store, even though they lived in town, except during a huge sale event. And so those, and then they were the ones that were the first to complain about something trivial, it seemed like. And you're like, I mean, really? Are you kidding me? And like, those were the ones I think, but like when a customer that came in, I saw him in the store every day. And if he had a complaint or an issue or a question, those were the ones that, you want to take care of everybody, but those are the ones I really would focus on to make sure that we got them taken care of, because, they want to like the store, and they do like it. And like a lot of times, just a little bit of that ill will, that feeling of just that something isn't right, can really turn against you. So there's the differences in customers are, I think you have to acknowledge them, and sometimes you're not going to please everyone, but you do what you can.
Yeah. You just absolutely, be there, listen, provide value and help. And ultimately that wins, it in the long run, you'll win some. I mean, you'll lose some, but ultimately that type of mentality will prevail, I think. And so it's definitely a beast of its own, I guess.
Yeah.
And every situation is different too,
for sure. Timing and where someone lives and the circumstance of how something broke and yada, 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 and everything. And this has been in my own personal experience with dealing with businesses on a return, or, everything is an emergency to you when it's right. Happened to you. But, to translate that to the company side is not always the same thing. And they might not take it the same way, but you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes and say, all right, we need to get this handled in this time frame and what they need and all that good stuff. And it's a chore. It's a battle. It's kind of that other side of life that I want to stay away from the customer side of life. After 15 years, I just want to be away from that for a little bit here.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a little resentment towards customer service, Phil.
No, not really. I mean, it was fun. Like a lot of times depending on the customer, it was kind of fun to like help them work on a problem once you got them to realize that you were trying to help them. And there were some people that they hated you and no matter what you did, they were going to hate you. But a lot of folks, once you made a valid effort to try to help them and maybe do something that was, not in the norms, and they appreciate it. And it was super rewarding at that point. But that wasn't all the time. And sometimes what people thought was reasonable wasn't reasonable to us. And so you maybe had to find a common ground, and who knows? Mm-hmm. Anyways,
it can also be an opportunity to build if handled correctly.
Oh yeah.
It can be an opportunity to build a lifelong customer too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of the guys that were probably end up being our best customers were maybe ones that, and I ended up getting a lot of these because when I was a customer service manager or when I was the operations manager, I was the guy who got all of them. And if, a lot of those folks that you work with, they ended up being the guys that came in all the time, and they would seek you out if they had questions or if they wanted advice or maybe even just not a complaint, but just to talk. And so it was kind of cool to see that side of it. I actually really appreciated that. And Doug, I would not be one of my podcasts if a phone didn't ring during one of them. I think every one of them.
Glad I wasn't.
Yeah, I had it on silent too. I wonder why. Oh, I turned it on so I could hear when you texted back, and I forgot to turn it off. Anyways, so that's enough about customer service. So I was gonna say, so you guys your duck season doesn't start for a long time, and I've been in Northwest Arkansas a handful of times. My girlfriend's family lives there, so I've been there a handful of times. And as I drive through there, and everybody says, so when I tell people that my girlfriend lives in Arkansas, everybody's immediately like, "Oh wow, duck hunting! You must love that." I'm like, no, she's actually from Little Rock, which is close to the duck stuff, but I'd never go there because all of her family lives in Fayetteville area now. And I'm like, no, anytime we're ever there for that, it's about as far removed from duck country as you could be. And so I was kind of wondering if duck hunting is a big thing in that corner of the state. Like, I mean, is it even remotely as big as the rest of the state? Do you think? So
yes and no. Of course, for the listeners who just give them a little context. So Northwest Arkansas is up in what you call the hills, not far from the Ozark Mountains, and part of it kind of extends in there. So the duck hunting is not good here. However, there's a ton of industry here. With Walmart, JB Hunt, Tyson. So there's a lot of people here. And what I've found is that there's a ton of duck hunters that live here. You just have to travel, down to
a few hours away.
A couple hours away to get into some duck stuff. You can go west to Oklahoma. Missouri's not far. There's a lot of good places you can get to within a couple hours, but yeah, here specifically, the duck hunting is not great.
That's the same way. I think there's quite a few places like that where, you had the people end up living in the city, which is not always great for it, but they're trying to maintain a distance where you still have the hunting. Where I actually live right kind of in the hunting and was lucky enough but like the town I live in, I mean, I'm not going to go find any kind of a high paying job in the town I live in. Most likely I'd have to travel 30 miles either directionally to find a town that would have that. But then again, you have to drive further to duck hunt. So I kind of struck a good balance with that myself. But, so are you guys like, when you're hunting there, I mean, like you personally, do you guys do you hunt? You and buddies, do you guys hunt? Are you hunting timber? Are you hunting fields, like rice field type stuff? Are you hunting marshes? Like I don't really know outside of what would be the prairie of Arkansas. And I guess I know a little bit of like East Central Oklahoma. I've been in that area and hunted a bit. I assume it's probably different than either of those.
Yeah. So mostly the most areas that I hunt are flooded grain fields, rice primarily, timber when the ducks are using it, and then kind of some general kind of just your typical wetlands type scenario. Not there probably is some if you went west into Oklahoma. There probably is some dry field stuff. I don't do any of that, even though that's all I used to do.
Oh, yeah.
I don't do much of that anymore. So yeah, I do a lot. I probably spend most of my time in a flooded rice field just because it's the most consistent. But if the opportunity arises, I'm definitely going to the timber.
I'd be standing up next to a tree, kicking some water. It's it's one of those things that I've hunted Arkansas timber 5 years, something like that, 4 or 5 times. And it's one of those things that I absolutely love doing it. I don't, however, think it's the thing I would want to do every day for my everyday duck hunting. There's something, being around here, I need to be able to see the horizon once in a while and see ducks at a distance rather than just right on top of me. So I think that's maybe what part of it is. But it's such a unique deal that one of these days I'm just going to do a podcast entirely on hunting the woods and get a couple of guys, and maybe Keith and you are going to be a good one on that.
Yeah,
just kind of sure. There's a lot of folks who've never done it, and it's not that you probably need more people in the Arkansas woods roaming around, but actually now the Game and Fish in Arkansas, they instituted some regulations on limiting the number of non-residents and the days you can hunt. So I honestly am glad to see that. Even as a non-resident, it would affect me, and I'm probably not going to hunt over 30 days in Arkansas anyways. But I'm glad to see it.
You've seen how that can be proactive in your own state.
Oh, South Dakota, exactly.
The same way, right?
Yep, South Dakota, we have like a lottery system, and it's controlled, and it's super beneficial. And I actually think it's beneficial both to the residents and the non-residents, because when you come here, you're guaranteed, not guaranteed, but you're going to have a way different experience than if you go to North Dakota, where the licenses are unlimited and you cross that border and there's a hunter or two at every field, and there's almost damn near a drag race to get to a farmer's house to get onto a pit cornfield that's got 5,000 mallards circling it. Like we typically won't have that here because there's just not enough people hunting, and it really preserves the quality of the hunting for everybody who comes. Like, even when I lived in Minnesota, I was more than happy to have the lottery in South Dakota, that when we drew it every other year, or every third year, whatever it was back then, we were happy because we knew that when we got that sucker in our pocket, we were going to come out here and have a good hunt. And we basically did every single time. Whereas when you went to North Dakota, we still had good hunts, but man, it was a lot more stressful because you were getting the fields at 4:30 because someone else was going to be there probably, and it was a different deal. So I'm glad to see that Arkansas did it. I mean, I would, even if it meant me only hunting there every other year, or maybe less days every year, whatever it happened to be, I would gladly rather go there and have those hunts be world class than go there every year and hunt a bunch of days and have the hunts be half-ass. So I was kind of glad to see that, but yeah, the woods is a special place. It's
a lot of people are very, very touchy on the subject, so I won't weigh in on my opinion, but there's definitely advantages to it that can't be denied for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I would completely understand why someone wouldn't want to see it, but I guess I haven't really read enough on forums or whatever to know like what the general consensus is, but that's my take. So if people are mad, let me know, I guess. But
you're going to get it now.
Oh boy, watch out. My email will light up. I didn't put any input on either way. So I really don't have anything to say about it. It just happened to happen, but it was, I'm okay with it happening though. I will say that. So just like I was okay with the mojos and all that stuff happening there too. So help preserve a little bit of, quality hunting, I think, in the woods again. So it all helps. But cool, man. Well, I think I'm going to go, I'm going to let you go. I got to go do some scouting. I got to find a spot for tomorrow. So I made the mistake of not scouting last night. Well, I couldn't because I was recording a podcast, and just went to a place I had permission for, and without looking, and that was a bomb. Shot one wood duck, and I made a not a rookie mistake, but I guess a busy guy mistake, and didn't scout. So I'm paid for it. So I'm gonna go put some miles on tonight and track some down.
Well, I definitely don't feel bad for you.
Yeah, you're not hunting for a while.
I'm sitting here at my desk, shaking my head right now.
I'm probably not going to get a lot of sympathy on that side of life, so I'm not really going to push that anymore. Cool, man. Well, thanks for joining me. We'll have to do it again for sure. Maybe so we'll get Keith maybe and get a little timber talk going, and I try to avoid the instructional side of life, but sure. I do think that would be one where learning advice from people who've done it, and whether it's about, where to even start, what to do, what things you're looking for, all that kind of stuff. 'Cause I know before we went, man, I was just overwhelmed, and we just have to go and just do it. And that might just be the biggest piece of advice that I could give someone, is just go and do it and just learn, and don't be afraid to fail. But from there,
just go.
Yeah, just go. Yep. There's obviously what's that?
Yeah, he'd be Keith would be you'd enjoy that. You definitely should have him on. I mean, there's things even about the timber that I never even realized before I started hunting it more, that so much of it is even just picking the right the right trees for the break, and not necessarily the tree that you're going to be leaning up against, but even certain trees are going to serve as blockades to confine the bird. Just all kinds of little intricate details like that you just don't really even think about. If you
years of experience are the only way to do it. Mm-hmm. That's the only way you'd ever learn it, or listen to a podcast where someone tells you about it.
That's right.
Cool, man. Well, I'll let you roll. I'm going to get on the move here. So appreciate you coming on, and thanks everybody for listening, and we will catch you all next week. Have a good one.